The silence in the house was heavy, but for the first time in my life, it did not feel lonely. It felt complete. It was the silence of a vault that had finally been filled with its intended treasure. I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling of our master bedroom. The morning light of Highland Park was filtering through the heavy silk curtains, painting the room in shades of muted grey and soft silver. It was raining outside. I could hear the rhythmic, gentle drumming against the panoramic windows, a sound that usually lulled me back to sleep, but today, my mind was too sharp, too alive. I turned my head to the left. The pillow beside me was empty, still carrying the faint indentation of her head. I reached out a hand, my fingers brushing against the cool Egyptian cotton. I wasn't alarmed by her absence. I knew exactly where she was. Emily had left early, probably around 6 in the morning, for her post-wedding recovery day at the spa with her mother and bridesmaids. It was a tradition, she had told me. A way to decompress after the frantic stress of planning the perfect ceremony. I looked at my own hand resting on the white sheet. The gold band on my ring finger caught the dim light. It felt strange, heavy, yet grounding. Married. I was a married man. At 34, after years of building my career, analyzing market risks, calculating probabilities, and managing crises for billion-dollar portfolios, I had finally closed the most important deal of my life. I had secured the variable that couldn't be quantified. Love. I sat up, swinging my legs over the edge of the bed. My feet touched the cold hardwood floor, and a shiver ran up my spine. The house was massive, perhaps too big for 2 people, but it was an investment. Everything I did was an investment. This property in the suburbs of Chicago, with its smart home systems and architectural pedigree, was the physical manifestation of safety. It was the fortress I had built for us. I walked downstairs, the house echoing with the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the climate control system. The living room was still a chaotic shrine to yesterday's celebration. Stacks of silver-wrapped gifts sat on the coffee table. A stray ribbon lay on the rug. A half-empty bottle of champagne stood on the kitchen island next to a crystal flute with a lipstick stain on the rim. Emily's lipstick. I smiled. It was a tired, genuine smile. The wedding had been perfect. Expensive. Yes. Exhausting. Absolutely. But perfect. Emily had looked like a vision in lace, her smile radiant as she walked down the aisle. I remembered the way her father shook my hand, the way her mother dabbed at her eyes. They had welcomed me into the family with an enthusiasm that touched me deeply. I had no family of my own, not really. My parents had passed when I was in college, and I had spent the last decade working 80-hour weeks, replacing personal connections with professional achievements. The Graces, Emily's family, had filled that void. They were loud, colorful, and sometimes chaotic, but they were family. I started the coffee machine, the grinding of beans shattering the peace for a moment. While the machine hissed and dripped, I leaned against the marble counter and exhaled. Tomorrow, we would be on a plane to the Maldives. 2 weeks of nothing but turquoise water and my wife. My wife. I rolled the word around in my mind, testing its weight. I needed to check the flight itinerary. I usually managed everything from my phone, but it was charging upstairs. I spotted the household iPad sitting on the breakfast bar, propped up in its leather case. We had bought it a month ago to control the house's automation, lights, music, security cameras. It was signed into a shared family account we had created, a digital merging of our lives. I picked it up. The screen woke with a soft glow. The background was a photo of us from our engagement shoot in Paris. We looked happy. I looked younger, less severe than I usually did in my corporate headshots. Emily looked ethereal, her head thrown back in laughter. I swiped up to unlock it. I intended to open the email app to check the confirmation numbers for the seaplane transfer, but a notification banner was stuck to the top of the screen, persistent and annoying. Storage almost full. iCloud photos updated. I frowned. The device was new. It had plenty of storage. I tapped the notification, my analyst brain automatically wanting to clear the error and optimize the system. The Photos app opened. The interface was cluttered. Thousands of photos had poured in overnight. It took me a second to realize what had happened. Emily must have connected her phone to the charger downstairs before she left, or perhaps the settings had been changed to download and keep originals. The iPad had spent the night aggressively syncing with her iPhone cloud account. Rows of thumbnails filled the screen. Hundreds of photos from the wedding. Selfies with her bridesmaids. Shots of the cake. Blurry photos of the dance floor. I scroll through them, feeling a warm sense of voyeurism, seeing our wedding through her eyes. There were photos of me from a distance, talking to guests. I looked stiff, as always. I made a mental note to relax my shoulders more often. I scrolled up, moving back in time. The rehearsal dinner. The dress fitting. The week before the wedding. Then, my finger hovered over the albums tab at the bottom. I was looking for the honeymoon folder she said she had started, filled with inspiration pictures of beaches and villas. Instead, I saw the recently deleted folder. It had a badge count, 14 items. I don't know why I clicked it. Perhaps it was instinct. In my line of work, the data that people try to hide is often more valuable than the data they present. Or maybe I was just looking for a photo she deemed unflattering to tease her about later. I opened the folder. Most of the items were innocent. A blurry photo of the floor. A screenshot of a weather app. A duplicate selfie where her eyes were closed. And one video. It was the thumbnail that caught my attention. It wasn't from the wedding. The lighting was dark, neon purple and red. A club atmosphere. The timestamp read, Friday 11:42 p.m. Friday. 2 nights ago. The night before the wedding. Emily had told me she was having a quiet evening at her parents' house, doing face masks and writing her vows. She said she needed rest to look fresh for the big day. I had stayed at the hotel near the venue, drinking a single scotch and reviewing the seating charts. I tapped the video. The screen expanded. The image was shaky at first, the camera obviously propped up against something, maybe an ice bucket or a stack of napkins on a low table. The angle was tilted, capturing a semicircular booth in a VIP section of a club I didn't recognize. There were men. 5 of them. They weren't sitting across from her. They were woven into the space around her. It wasn't a scene of violence, nor was it a scene of overt, graphic obscenity. It was something far more insidious. It was a scene of extreme comfort. Emily was in the center, wearing a dress I had never seen, something short, silver, and aggressive. She was holding a glass of champagne, leaning back against the shoulder of a man whose face was shadowed, while another man laughed, whispering something into her ear that made her throw her head back. Her hand rested casually on the thigh of the man to her right. I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. My heart did not speed up, it slowed down. It was the physiological response to a sudden drop in cabin pressure. Then, the audio kicked in. The bass of the club music was thumping in the background, a muffled, rhythmic heartbeat, but the voices were surprisingly clear, caught in a pocket of relative quiet between tracks. Put the phone away, Jen. Emily's voice. It was slurred, but distinct. The camera adjusted. The voice of the person filming, Jennifer, her maid of honor, giggled from behind the lens. Relax, Em. I'm not posting it. It's for the archives. The last night of freedom. On the screen, Emily took a long sip of champagne and waved a dismissive hand at the lens. Then she looked directly at the camera. Her eyes were glazed, but the expression on her face was one of sharp, predatory amusement. It was a look I had never directed at me. Freedom, she scoffed. She leaned forward, the motion causing the men around her to shift closer, like iron filings to a magnet. You guys don't get it. Tomorrow isn't the end of my freedom. It's the purchase of it. One of the men laughed. That's cold, Emily. Poor guy doesn't know what hit him. Poor guy is a bore, Emily said, her voice dropping an octave, filled with a venomous kind of pity. David is safe. He's a calculator in a human suit. He checks the humidity levels before he opens a window. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is to pretend to care about risk management and actuarial tables? My hand gripping the iPad tightened. My knuckles turned white. The world outside the window had stopped. The rain was silent. The only sound in the universe was her voice coming from the small speakers. So why marry him? The man asked, his hand tracing the line of her arm. Emily smirked. It was a cruel, twisted expression that distorted her beautiful features into something grotesque. Because is a golden parachute, idiots. I've done the math, or rather, my mother did. 5 years. I give him 5 years of the perfect wife routine. I smile, I host his dull dinner parties. Maybe I pop out a kid to secure the anchor. Then, Irreconcilable differences. I take half the assets, plus child support, plus alimony. I'll be set for life before I'm 35. She raised her glass in a mock toast to the camera. To David. The best investment I ever made. The table erupted in laughter. The men clinked their glasses against hers. One of them kissed her cheek, lingering. She didn't pull away. She leaned into it. Just make sure he never sees the real you, Jennifer said from behind the camera. Please, Emily sneered, rolling her eyes. He sees what he wants to see. He's so desperate to be loved. He'd believe me if I said the sky was green. He's pathetic, really. But he's rich. And that makes him tolerable. The video ended abruptly. The screen went black, then returned to the recently deleted folder view. I sat there, frozen. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the tablet across the room. I didn't cry. I felt a physical sensation in my chest, as if a rib had snapped inward and punctured a lung. I couldn't breathe, but my mind was racing at a velocity that made me dizzy. Pathetic. Calculator in a human suit. Golden parachute. Desperate to be loved. Every word was a precision strike. She hadn't just cheated on me physically. She had dismantled my entire existence. She had mocked the very core of who I was. My care, my planning, my desire to provide. She saw it all as a weakness to be exploited. I looked at the kitchen around me. The expensive espresso machine. The custom cabinets. The wedding gifts. It was all a stage set. I was the only actor who didn't know he was in a play. A wave of nausea rolled over me. I placed the iPad down on the cool marble counter, afraid I might crush it. My hands were trembling, a fine, high-frequency tremor. I walked to the sink and splashed cold water on my face. I needed to reset. I needed to think. This was a crisis. In my job, when a market crashed or a geopolitical event threatened a portfolio, the first rule was, do not panic. Assess the damage. Verify the data. Formulate a strategy. I dried my face with a paper towel. I looked at my reflection in the dark window. I looked the same, but the person looking back felt entirely different. The husband was dead. He had died the moment that video started playing. The man staring back was the risk analyst, and he had just identified a catastrophic breach in security. I walked back to the iPad. I needed to save that video. If she had deleted it, she thought it was gone. She didn't understand how the cloud worked. She didn't understand that deleted just meant hidden for 30 days. I was about to tap the recover button when a banner notification slid down from the top of the screen. It was an iMessage. Because the iPad was synced to her account, her text messages were mirroring here too. Sender, Mom message. Did you make sure to permanently delete that video from Jen's phone and yours? You know how David is with details. If he sees that, the whole plan falls apart before we even get the first transfer. Be smart. Honey. We've worked too hard for this. I stared at the text bubble. The white letters on the grey background. It wasn't just Emily. My knees finally gave out. I sank onto one of the bar stools, the air leaving my lungs in a sharp hiss. Linda. Her mother. The woman who had cried at the altar yesterday. The woman who had hugged me and told me I was the son she never had. It was a conspiracy. It wasn't a mistake, or a moment of weakness, or a lapse in judgment. It was a coordinated, premeditated operation. They had targeted me. They had profiled me. They knew I was lonely, wealthy, and stable. They had built a trap, baited it with the perfect woman, and I had walked right into it, smiling the whole time. The whole plan falls apart. Before we even get the first transfer, they were waiting for money. What money? My mind flashed to the accounts. I had set up a joint account last week, a gesture of trust. I had transferred a significant sum there for household expenses and the honeymoon. But the bulk of my assets were in investment accounts. Wait. Yesterday morning. The paperwork. In the flurry of the wedding preparation, Linda had brought me some documents to sign. Just insurance stuff for the venue, she had said. I had glanced at them. I always glanced, but I was distracted. I was happy. I trusted them. Had I signed something else? Or was it simpler? Had I given Emily access codes? I remembered the conversation last night, in the limo leaving the reception. Emily had asked about the investment portfolio login. She said she wanted to learn to be responsible and understand our future. I had been so proud of her interest. I had given her the secondary password. I looked at the clock on the stove.
9:15 Uhr morgens.
Banks were closed. It was Sunday, but online transfers were instant up to a certain limit. The nausea vanished, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. It was a sensation I knew well. It was the feeling of entering the war room at the office during a market collapse. The emotions, the hurt, the betrayal, the humiliation, were still there, but I shoved them into a mental box and locked the lid. They were distractions. I could grieve later. I could rage later. Right now, I was under attack. I looked at the iPad again. The text from her mother was still there. If he sees that. He sees it, I whispered to the empty room. My voice sounded strange, raspy, and dry. I reached out and took a screenshot of the text message. Then I went into the recently deleted folder, selected the video, and hit recover. It moved back to the main album. I immediately airdropped both the video and the screenshot to my personal secure phone, the one I used for work, which was not synced to the house cloud. Once the transfer was complete, I verified the files were on my encrypted device. The evidence was safe. Now, I had to buy time. I looked at the iPad. If I didn't reply, or if I deleted the message, she might get suspicious. But I wasn't Emily. I couldn't reply as her. I waited. Another text came through from Linda. Sender. Mom message. Emily? Are you at the spa? Just text me a thumbs up if it's gone. Don't want to stress. I watched the screen. I needed to remove the evidence of my discovery. I went to the text thread. I deleted Linda's messages from the iPad. It wouldn't delete them from Emily's phone, but it would clear them from this screen in case she came home and checked the tablet. Then I went back to the Photos app. I selected the video. I didn't just delete it. I permanently deleted it from the recently deleted folder on the iPad. To Emily, it would look like she had successfully erased her tracks. If she checked her phone, the video would be gone. She would think she was safe. She would think the boring husband was none the wiser. I stood up. The coffee machine beeped, signaling the brew was ready. The smell of the dark roast, usually my favorite scent in the world, made my stomach turn. I walked over to the kitchen island and poured the coffee down the sink. The dark liquid swirled and vanished into the drain. I wasn't the man who drank coffee and read the Sunday paper anymore. That man had ceased to exist. I walked to the window and looked out at the rain-soaked driveway. My reflection in the glass was ghostly. I adjusted my collar. They wanted a villain? No, they didn't want a villain. They wanted a fool. They wanted a passive, blind, check-writing fool. They were about to find out that when you marry a risk analyst, you don't just get his money. You get his attention to detail. I turned away from the window and walked toward my home office. I needed my laptop. I needed my secure tokens. I needed to audit my entire life. I had about 4 hours before she returned from the spa. 4 hours to dismantle the life I had spent 2 years building. I sat down at my desk, the leather chair creaking familiar comfort. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue. I cracked my knuckles. The sound was loud in the silent house. Okay, Emily, I said softly to the empty room. Let's look at the math. I began to type. The door to my home office clicked shut, and the sound was like the ceiling of an airlock. The air inside was cooler than the rest of the house, conditioned to a precise 68 degrees to protect the servers running in the closet. I sat down in my errand chair, the mesh fabric stretching taut under my weight. I placed the secure phone on the desk and the recovered iPad next to it. They looked like artifacts from 2 different civilizations, one a tool of professional paranoia, the other a tablet meant for family photos and recipes, now weaponized against me. I did not immediately open my laptop. I took 30 seconds to breathe. In risk management, the most dangerous variable is always the human element, specifically the operator's emotional state. If I acted out of rage, I would make mistakes. I would leave fingerprints. I would be sloppy. Rage was a blunt instrument. I needed a scalpel. I closed my eyes and visualized the anger as a red fluid in a beaker. In my mind, I poured it into a lead container, sealed the lid, and placed it on a shelf. When I opened my eyes, the room felt sharper. I was no longer a husband grieving a betrayal. I was an auditor conducting a forensic dismantling of a failed merger. I woke my workstation. The 3 monitors hummed to life, bathing the darkened room in a cold, blue glow. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. The first step was legal insulation. I needed to know the terrain before I started moving troops. I picked up my secure phone and dialed Marcus. Marcus Vance was not just a lawyer. He was a shark who wore Savile Row suits. We had met in grad school, bonded over a shared disdain for mediocrity, and he had been the first person I called when I decided to propose to Emily. He had drafted the prenuptial agreement. He had warned me, gently, that the Grace family seemed overly enthusiastic about my portfolio, but I had dismissed it as cynicism. The phone rang 3 times. David. Marcus's voice was thick with sleep or perhaps the aftermath of a late brunch. It is Sunday morning. Unless the sec is raiding your office or you've accidentally set fire to that monstrosity of a house, this better be good. You're supposed to be in marital bliss mode. I need you to open a secure channel, Marcus, I said. My voice surprised me. It was devoid of inflection. It sounded robotic. There was a pause on the other end. The rustling of sheets stopped. The tone of his breathing changed. Marcus knew that voice. It was the voice I used when a portfolio was bleeding out millions by the second. Give me 2 minutes, he said, the sleep gone instantly. I'm going to my study. I waited, watching the rain streak against the floor-to-ceiling window. The grey sky of Chicago looked like a bruised ceiling. Okay, Marcus said, his voice now clear, echoing slightly in what I knew was his wood-panelled library. I'm on the encrypted line. What happened? Did she leave? No, I said. She's at a spa. I need to send you a file. Check your private server drop. I'm sending it now. I dragged the video file and the screenshot of the text message from Linda into the secure transfer portal we used for sensitive corporate data. The progress bar zipped across the screen. 100%. Received, Marcus said. Opening. I listened to the silence. It stretched for a minute, then 2. I could hear the faint click of his mouse as he likely replayed the video. I imagined his face. Marcus had seen everything. Corporate espionage, embezzlement, boardroom coups, but this was personal. This was dirty. My God, Marcus whispered finally. The cynicism was gone, replaced by a cold, professional fury. David, the text from the mother. This isn't just infidelity. This is conspiracy to commit fraud. Exactly, I said. I don't want a divorce, Marcus. Divorce implies a partnership that failed. This wasn't a partnership. It was a long con. I want an annulment. Annulment based on fraud, Marcus murmured, the sound of him typing rapidly filling the line. In Illinois, if we can prove that she entered the marriage with no intention of honoring the vows, and specifically for financial gain, we can argue the contract is void ab initio. From the beginning. It's a high bar, David. Usually, judges hate granting them. Watch the video again, I said. Listen to the part about the 5-year plan and the alimony. Listen to her mother's text about the first transfer. They have a timeline. They have a strategy. This wasn't a marriage. It was a heist. You're right, Marcus said, his voice hardening. This is a smoking gun. If we play this right, she doesn't get half. She doesn't get equitable distribution. She gets nothing. We erase the marriage like it never happened. But David, the timeline is critical. If you cohabit, if you consummate the marriage further, if you act like a husband after knowing this, a judge could argue you accepted the fraud. I haven't seen her since I found out, I said. She's not in the house. I'm removing her access. Good. Don't let her back in, Marcus commanded. But we have a problem. The assets. If she has access to anything joint, she can drain it before we get a court order. It's Sunday. Courts are closed. I can't get an emergency freeze until tomorrow morning at the earliest. I know, I said. I'm going to handle the liquidity. You handle the paperwork. Draft the petition. I want it filed the second the clerk's office opens tomorrow. David, Marcus warned, don't do anything illegal. Don't hack her accounts. I don't need to hack, I said, staring at the banking portal on my center monitor. I'm the primary account holder. I'm just closing the gates. We hung up. I was alone again. I logged into my primary banking dashboard. The numbers on the screen were comforting in their logic. Assets, liabilities, cash flow. I navigated to the Pending Transactions tab. There they were. The Bleeding Wounds. Luxury Maldives Resort. Pending, $24,000. Floral Design Studio. Pending, $8,500. Catering Services. Pending, $12,000. I selected them all. My mouse hovered over the Stop Payment button. I clicked it. A warning box popped up. Stopping these payments may result in cancellation of services and penalty fees. Are you sure? I'm counting on it, I muttered, confirming the action. The status changed from pending to cancel the stop payment requested. Then I moved to the credit cards. I pulled up the Amex Platinum I had given her 3 months ago as an authorized user. I scanned the recent charges. It was a map of her deception. The Sapphire Club, Friday, 11:30 p.m. $1,200. That was the club from the video. She had paid for the drinks for the men she was flirting with using my card. The audacity was breathtaking. I went to the Card Management tab. Remove Authorized User, Emily Grace. Click. Confirm. The card in her purse was now a piece of useless plastic. But then I hit the wall. The investment account. Yesterday, in a moment of sentimental stupidity, I had initiated a transfer of $200,000 from my primary brokerage holding to our new joint savings. It was meant to be the down payment on a vacation home she wanted in Aspen. The transfer was internal, meaning it would clear instantly unless I stopped it. I clicked on the joint account. The money was there. It was available. If she logged in from her phone, she could move that money to her personal account instantly. It was joint property now. She had full rights to it. $200,000. It wasn't my entire fortune, but the principle of letting her keep it made my stomach churn. It was the first transfer her mother had texted about. I tried to transfer it back. Error. Transfer exceeds daily limit for mobile banking. I tried to change the password for the account. Security check required. To change the password for this joint account, we need to verify your identity. A one-time passcode, OTP, has been sent to the mobile number on file ending in -4582. I froze. -4582. That was Emily's number. When we set up the joint account, the banker had asked for a primary mobile number for security alerts. Emily had laughed, squeezed my arm, and said, "Use mine. David is always in meetings. He never sees texts. I handle the household stuff." I had agreed. I had let her become the gatekeeper. I stared at the screen. To lock her out, I needed the code. The code was on her phone. She was at the spa. If I tried to reset the number, it would take 24 hours for security verification. By then, she could have moved the money. I leaned back, steepled my fingers, and looked at the phone. I had to call her. I had to speak to the woman who had called me a calculator in a human suit and convince her to give me the key to her own destruction. If I sounded angry, she would know. If I sounded cold, she would be suspicious. I had to be the David she mocked, the boring, anxious, doting husband who was stressing over details. I had to play the role she had written for me. I picked up my personal cell phone, the one she knew. My hand hovered over her contact. Her photo was a candid shot I had taken of her laughing on a boat on Lake Michigan. It looked so innocent. It was a mask. I pressed call. The ringing sound was a slow torture. 1 ring. 2 rings. Pick up, I willed her. Pick up before you check your notifications and see the credit card decline. Hey, baby. Her voice burst through the speaker, cheerful, airy, surrounded by the ambient noise of soft wind chimes and distant chatter. I was just about to go in for my facial. Is everything okay? You miss me already? The sound of her voice, so casually affectionate, was like a physical blow. A flash of the video played in my mind, her hand on the stranger's thigh. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. Hey, Em, I said. I pitched my voice up slightly, injecting a note of frantic, nervous energy. I'm so sorry to bother you. I know it's your relaxed day. It's okay, she cooed. What's wrong? You sound stressed. It's the Maldives, I lied. The lie came easier than I expected. I was just double-checking the reservation for the underwater villa, and there's a problem with the deposit hold. The hotel is saying the card on file is flagging a security alert because it's a foreign transaction. Oh no, she said, her voice dipping in concern, not for me, but for the villa. Did you lose the reservation? Not yet, I said, typing rapidly on my keyboard, initiating the password reset sequence again to trigger the code. I'm on the dashboard right now. I need to verify the account to authorize the international clearance. Otherwise, they're going to release the room to the waitlist in 10 minutes. And you know how hard it was to get the Sunset Suite. God, David, she sighed, a hint of that familiar impatience creeping in. Why does this always happen? Did you not call the bank beforehand? I did, I stammered, playing the incompetent fool. Look, the system just needs a verification code. Since your number is the primary on the joint profile, it sent the text to you. Can you check? It should have just popped up. Hold on, she said. I heard the rustle of fabric, the sound of her moving the phone. I have to get my bag, okay, let me see. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was the gamble. If she read the text carefully, it would say security alert, password change request. If she was paying attention, she would know I was lying. But she was at a spa. She was relaxed. And most importantly, she thought I was an idiot. Okay, I see it, she said. Bank of America, right? Yes, I said, holding my breath. What's the code, honey? Hurry, the screen is timing out. It's 884210, she read. 884210, I repeated, typing it into the box. Okay, let me try. I hit enter. Identity verified. Please enter new password. Did it work? She asked. Processing. I said. I typed in a new password. Something complex. Something 64 characters long that she would never guess in 1,000 lifetimes. Password changed successfully. All other sessions have been logged out. Yes. I exhaled, and this time the relief was real. It went through. The villa is safe. Good, she said, her voice relaxing. You really need to stop panicking over every little thing, David. You're going to give yourself a heart attack before we even get to the beach. I know, I said. I just want everything to be perfect for you. It will be, she said, and I could hear the smirk in her voice. I have to go. The masseurs is waiting. I'll see you at home tonight. Maybe we can order sushi. Actually, I said, take your time. Enjoy the day. I'll handle dinner. You're the best, she said automatically. Love you. Bye, I said. I hung up. I didn't say I love you back. I couldn't force my mouth to form the shape of the lie. I dropped the phone on the desk as if it were contaminated. I turned back to the screen. I was in. I went immediately to the joint account. Transfer funds. From joint savings to David Personal Holdings, external. Amount $200,000. 00, entire balance. I clicked submit. Transfer complete. The balance in the joint account dropped to $0. 00. I sat back. The money was gone. She was locked out. The credit cards were dead. The trap was armed. But I wasn't done. I opened the folder on my desktop labeled House. I logged into the Smart Home Administration panel. This was the nervous system of our physical life. I saw her user profile, Emily Admin. I downgraded her permissions from admin to guest. Then I went to the access logs. I wanted to see when she had last entered the house. Front door opened, 6:15 a.m. today. I went to the locks tab. The front gate, the garage door, the front door, the back patio. They all operated on keypad codes and facial recognition. I selected Reset All Access Codes. I generated a new master code. Then I went to the facial recognition database. I found her biometric profile. Delete. The system prompted me. Are you sure you want to remove this user? They will no longer be able to access the property. I clicked yes without hesitation. I moved to the HVAC controls. I lowered the temperature in the house to 62 degrees. Cold. Sterile. Unwelcoming. Then, I remembered the car. I had leased a Range Rover for her as a wedding gift. It was parked at the spa right now. But the lease was in my name. The app on my phone controlled the vehicle. I opened the Land Rover remote app. I located the vehicle. It was stationary. Highland Park Spa and Resort. I couldn't disable it while she was driving. That would be dangerous, and I wasn't a monster. I was a corrective force, but I could prevent it from starting again. I tapped the Stolen Vehicle or Immobilize feature. It required a PIN. I entered it. Command sent. Vehicle will not restart after next engine shut off. When she walked out of that spa, glowing and relaxed, she would find her credit card declined at the desk. She would walk to her car, and it would be a brick. She would try to call me, and I wouldn't answer. I looked at the clock. 11:45 a.m. I had accomplished the digital erasure. Now came the physical one. I stood up, my joints popping. I felt a strange kind of exhaustion, a hollowness in my chest. It wasn't satisfaction. It was the grim fatigue of a surgeon who had just amputated a gangrenous limb. The patient would survive, but things would never be the same. I walked out of the office and into the hallway. The house was silent, but now the silence felt different. Before, it was the silence of anticipation. Now, it was the silence of a tomb. I climbed the stairs to the master bedroom. The unmade bed mocked me. The indentation on her pillow was still there. I walked into the massive walk-in closet. Her side was an explosion of color and texture. Rows of designer shoes, racks of silk dresses, shelves of handbags that cost more than most people's cars. I went to the garage and grabbed 4 large, heavy-duty storage bins, the kind used for industrial waste or long-term archiving. I dragged them up the stairs, the plastic scraping against the wood. I didn't fold anything. I started with the shoes. I swept them off the shelves in armfuls, Louboutins, Manolos, Jimmy Choos, and dumped them into the plastic bins. The sound of expensive leather clattering against hard plastic was jarring. Then the clothes. I pulled them off the hangers, not caring if silk tore or sequin snagged. I stuffed them into the boxes. The smell of her perfume, jasmine and vanilla, rose from the fabric, sickeningly sweet. I moved to the bathroom. The counter was covered in her products. Serums, creams, makeup palettes. I swept my arm across the granite. Bottles crashed into the bin. Glass shattered. A bottle of foundation broke, splattering beige liquid over a pair of running shoes I had already thrown in. I didn't clean it up. It took me an hour. When I was done, the room was stripped. The closet was bare, save for empty hangers rattling in the draft from the vent. I snapped the lids onto the bins. They were heavy. I dragged them, one by one, down the stairs, through the kitchen, and out into the garage. I didn't put them in the car. I stacked them against the wall, near the trash cans. I went back inside. I walked to the living room where the wedding gifts were piled. The crystal vase from her aunt. The silver platter from her cousin. I put them in a separate box. I would have them couriered to her parents' house tomorrow. I wanted nothing that carried the DNA of the Grace family in my airspace. Finally, I stood in the center of the living room. The wall. Our wedding portrait. We had it printed on canvas and framed just yesterday, a rush job for the reveal. It hung above the fireplace, 5 feet wide. I looked at our smiling faces. The lie was so high definition it hurt to look at. I reached up and took it down. It was heavy. I didn't smash it. That would be dramatic. I turned it around and leaned it against the wall, the raw canvas backing facing the room. I took a black marker from the kitchen drawer. On the back of the canvas, I wrote 2 words. Return to sender. I capped the marker. I checked my watch. 1:30 p.m. She would be finishing her lunch soon. The decline of the card would happen in roughly 45 minutes. The game was entering the kinetic phase. I went to the front door and opened it. The rain was coming down harder now, a cold, relentless sheet of grey. I stepped out onto the porch. I looked at the keypad on the gate. I typed in the old code, Her birthday. Access denied. Red light. I typed in the new code. Access granted. Green light. I closed the door and locked it. I engaged the deadbolt. I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. My hands were steady now. The tremor was gone. I sat on the stool where I had sat this morning, but I faced the door. I placed the iPad on the counter, the black screen reflecting the grey light. I waited. I wasn't a husband waiting for his wife. I was the wall she was about to crash into. Time inside the empty house did not pass in the usual way. It did not tick forward in seconds or minutes. Instead, it dripped. It was a slow, viscous accumulation of silence that filled the rooms like rising water, pressing against the glass, seeking a way out. I sat on the bar stool in the kitchen, the marble counter cold beneath my forearms, and listened to the rain drumming against the panoramic windows. The storm that had been threatening all morning had finally broken over Highland Park, turning the manicured lawns and slate roofs into a blurred grey watercolour painting. It was fitting. The world outside was weeping, thumping its fists against the earth, so I didn't have to. To my left, the laptop screen hummed with a quiet, blue malevolence, casting long, sharp shadows across the countertop. To my right lay the iPad, screen dark, resting like a dormant explosive device waiting for the tripwire to be pulled. I was no longer David Harper, the husband, the partner, the man who had stood at an altar 24 hours ago. I was the operator of a complex system that was currently executing a purge protocol. My heart rate was steady, unnaturally so. My breathing was even, measured, and deep. The trembling in my hands, which had threatened to shatter my resolve earlier, had been replaced by a terrifying, crystalline clarity. It was the state of mind I achieved only during high-stakes market crashes, a complete dissociation from fear, replaced by hyperfocus on the variables I could control. I was not feeling, I was calculating. I checked the time. It had been 45 minutes since I had drained the accounts and locked the digital gates. Emily would be finishing her treatment right about now. I closed my eyes and visualized the scene with the precision of a remote viewer. The soft ambient music of the spa, probably some generic pan flute loop designed to manufacture serenity. The scent of eucalyptus and lavender masking the chemical smell of chlorine. The plush white robe she would be tightening around her waist. She would be walking to the front desk, her skin glowing from the exfoliation, her mind already moving on to the next indulgence, perhaps a sushi lunch at that place on Central Avenue, or a shopping detour to pick up a scarf she didn't need before coming home to pack. She would reach into her designer purse, pull out the sleek black card I had given her, the symbol of her new status, and hand it to the receptionist with that practiced, dazzling smile of hers. The smile that said, "I deserve this. I deserve everything." A notification chimed on my laptop. It was a sharp, digital sound that cut through the silence of the kitchen like a scalpel. Alert. Transaction declined. Merchant. Highland Park Luxury Spa and Resort. Amount. $650. 00. Reason. Card suspended by administrator. I stared at the text, reading it twice to ensure the data was correct. I didn't smile. Smiling would imply pleasure, and I felt no pleasure. I felt only the grim satisfaction of a prediction confirmed, the way an engineer nods when a bridge holds weight during a stress test. The model was working. The variables were behaving exactly as anticipated. 10 minutes later, another chime. Louder this time in the quiet room. Alert. Transaction declined. Merchant. Highland Park Luxury Spa and Resort. Amount. $650. 00. Attempt. 2. She was trying again. I could imagine the slight frown creasing her forehead, the way her eyes would dart to the receptionist to see if she was being judged. She would give a polite, strained laugh. "Silly technology," she would say, tapping the chip against the reader. "Try it one more time. It must be the magnetic strip." She wouldn't be panicked yet. She would be annoyed. In Emily's world, money was like oxygen. It was just there, invisible and infinite. The idea that the supply could be cut off was foreign to her, a biological impossibility. Then, silence. She would be scrambling now, perhaps digging for a different card, one of the backups I had also neutralized in the first wave of the purge. Or maybe she was stepping away from the desk, cheeks flushing, calling the bank, only to be trapped in the automated purgatory of security questions she couldn't answer because I had changed the verbal passwords to strings of random alphanumeric characters she would never guess. My personal cell phone, lying face down on the counter, began to vibrate. A low, persistent buzz against the marble that sounded like an entrapped insect. Buzz. 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 Emily. I let it buzz. I watched it dance slightly across the smooth stone surface. It stopped, then started again immediately. Emily. Then a text message notification. Then another. Then a barrage of them. I didn't turn the phone over. I didn't need to read them to know the progression of her tone. It would follow the classic stages of grief, accelerated, confusion, frustration, demand, entitlement. She would be standing in the lobby of that spa, the heat rising in her cheeks, the polite smiles of the staff turning to awkward glances as they waited for payment. She hated embarrassment more than anything. She curated her image with the precision of a museum director, ensuring every angle was flattering, every lighting choice perfect. And I had just splattered paint across the canvas of her life. A new alert popped up on the laptop, this one from the vehicle telematics system, flashing red. Alert: remote ignition failed. Vehicle: Range Rover Sport. Status: immobilized. Reason: Security Protocol Alpha. She had given up on the payment, probably promising to return with cash or sorting it out over the phone, and had fled to the car. She wanted the safety of her leather-wrapped sanctuary. She wanted to slam the door, isolate herself from the judgment of the spa staff, and drive away from the awkwardness. But the car was a brick. 2 tons of useless metal and glass. She would be pushing the start button, hearing nothing but the mocking click of a system refusing to engage. The vibration of my phone became a continuous drill. She was panicking now. The narrative she had built for herself, the wealthy wife, the woman in control, the mastermind behind the long con, was crumbling in real time. She was stranded. It was raining. And her husband, the reliable, boring, predictable algorithm of a man, was silent. I stood up and walked to the refrigerator. I pulled out a bottle of sparkling water. My movements were slow, deliberate, conserving energy. I poured the water into a glass and watched the bubbles rise, counting them. 1, 2, 3. Every second I waited was a second she spent in the rain, in the confusion, in the dawning realization that the ground beneath her feet was not solid rock, but a trapdoor over an abyss. The landline on the wall rang. It was a jarring, archaic sound, shrill and demanding. We never used the landline. It was for the security company and emergencies. I looked at the caller ID. Unknown number. She was resourceful. She had borrowed a phone, or perhaps she was using the spa's front desk line, forcing herself to ask for help. She knew I might not answer my cell, thinking I was in a meeting or driving, but I would always answer the house line if I was home. It was the responsible thing to do. I stared at the device. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. You have one new message. I didn't listen to it. Not yet. I wanted the silence to stretch. Uncertainty is a powerful solvent. It dissolves confidence faster than any direct confrontation. If I spoke to her, she would have a target for her anger. If I remained silent, the anger would turn inward, transforming into fear. I walked into the living room. The space felt vast and cavernous without the personal touches I had stripped away. The walls where her art had hung were now blank rectangles of slightly brighter paint, ghost images of a life that no longer existed. The mantel was bare. The house felt like a hotel room between guests, sterile and indifferent. It was cleansing. I approached the window that overlooked the driveway. The rain was coming down in sheets now, driven by a biting wind off the lake. The grey light of the afternoon was fading into an early, gloomy twilight, blurring the line between earth and sky. I checked the security camera feed on my tablet. The driveway was empty, a slick black ribbon of wet asphalt. The black iron gates were shut tight, beaded with rain. And then, headlights. A pair of bright, white beams cut through the gloom at the bottom of the hill, fracturing in the raindrops. A vehicle was approaching. It wasn't the Range Rover. It was too big, too boxy. A black Cadillac Escalade. A high-end rideshare or a private car service. I watched as the massive SUV slowed and turned toward my gates. It stopped just inches from the iron bars. The brake lights glowed an angry red in the mist, reflecting off the wet pavement. The rear door opened. I expected to see Emily dash out, shielding her head with a purse, running to the keypad to let herself in, desperate to get out of the storm. But she didn't come out alone. From the back of the Escalade, 3 other figures emerged, spilling out like clowns from a car, huddling against the cold. I leaned closer to the glass, my breath fogging it slightly. I wiped it away with a cold hand. I recognized them instantly. Even in the rain, under the hoods of their coats, I knew them by their posture, by the way they moved. Jennifer, Sarah, Christina, the squad, the entourage, the women from the video. The chorus line that had laughed while my wife announced her plan to harvest my life for parts. My stomach tightened, not with fear, but with a sudden, sharp intake of disgust. She had brought them here. Why? The logic clicked into place a second later. She was embarrassed. Her card had been declined. Her car wouldn't start. She couldn't tell her successful, envious friends that her perfect husband, her golden parachute, had cut her off. That would destroy the illusion she had crafted so carefully. So she had spun a lie. She had probably told them the bank made a mistake, the car had a glitch, and that we should just go to the house to continue the celebration. "Come over," she would have said, forcing a bright tone. "David has vintage champagne. We'll get a tour of the new renovations. We'll laugh about this stupid day." She was using them as human shields. She thought that if she arrived with guests, I would be forced to play the role of the gracious host. She was banking on my manners. She was betting on my social anxiety, my distaste for scenes. She thought I wouldn't dare confront her in front of an audience. She was wrong. She had brought them to a party, but she didn't know she was actually bringing them to a deposition. I watched on the monitor as Emily ran to the keypad mounted on the brick pillar. She was wearing a cream-colored coat that was already dark with rain on the shoulders. She punched in the code. Nothing happened. The gates remained immovable. She punched it again. Harder. I could see her frustration in the jerky movements of her arm. She turned back to the car, shouting something to her friends who were huddling under the eaves of the vehicle's open trunk. She was performing. Even now, in the rain, soaking wet, she was acting the part of the mistress of the manor dealing with faulty technology. I walked to the wall panel that controlled the intercom system. I pressed the listen button, but I kept my microphone muted. The audio feed crackled with the sound of wind and rain, static hissing like a snake, but their voices cut through. Ridiculous. Emily was shouting, her voice tinny and distorted. The system must be down because of the storm. David is always tinkering with the settings. He probably reset the server and forgot to tell me. "Just call him again, Em." Jennifer's voice drifted through the speaker, sounding annoyed. "We are getting soaked out here, and this isn't funny." "I am calling him." Emily snapped, tapping furiously on her phone screen. "He's probably in the shower or listening to one of his stupid podcasts. He can't hear anything." She turned back to the keypad and pressed the call button. A chime rang through the house, echoing in the empty hallway like a doorbell in a mausoleum. "David!" She yelled into the intercom camera, staring right into the lens. "David, open the gate. It's me. The code isn't working. We have guests." I stood there, my finger hovering over the talk button. I looked at her face on the small screen. Her mascara was starting to run, leaving dark streaks down her cheeks. There was a desperation in her eyes that her friends couldn't see, but I could. She was terrified. Not of the rain, but of the silence. She knew. Somewhere deep down, beneath the layers of denial and narcissism, she knew something was wrong. The equation wasn't balancing. I pressed the button. "The code isn't working because I changed it," I said. My voice was calm. It didn't sound like me. It sounded like a recording. It sounded like the automated voice of the bank telling her insufficient funds. On the screen, Emily jumped. She looked around, trying to locate the source of the voice, before focusing on the camera lens. "David." She let out a laugh that was half relief, half hysteria. "God, you scared me. What do you mean you changed it? Why? Just open the gate, babe. The girls are here. We have sushi and wine. We are going to save the day." "There is no day to save, Emily," I said. "And the gate stays closed." The silence that followed was heavy, even through the static of the intercom. The friends, Jennifer, Sarah, Christina, stopped fidgeting. They looked at the intercom pillar, then at Emily. The dynamic had shifted instantly. The audience was confused. The script had been tossed out. "David, stop joking," Emily said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming harder. "It's pouring rain. We are wet. Open the damn gate. Now." "No," I said. One syllable. "Final." "What is your problem?" she screamed, losing the facade of the sweet wife entirely. "Is this because I'm late? Is this some passive-aggressive punishment because I spent too much at the spa? You are embarrassing me in front of my friends." "Your friends," I repeated. "Yes. I see them. Jennifer, Sarah, Christina. I'm glad they are here. Truly. It saves me the trouble of explaining it to them later." "Explaining what?" Jennifer called out, stepping closer to the camera, shielding her eyes from the rain. "David, is everything okay? You're acting weird." I took a breath. This was the moment. The point of no return. The incision. "Jennifer," I said, my voice carrying clearly over the speakers. "Do you remember Friday night? The Sapphire Club? Do you remember the video you took?" On the screen, Jennifer froze. Her hand went instinctively to her mouth. It was a subtle gesture, but it was a confession. Her eyes widened, darting to Emily. Emily looked at Jennifer, then back at the camera. Her face went pale, the color draining away so fast it looked like a time-lapse of a dying flower. "I don't know what you're talking about," Emily stammered, but the conviction was gone. The fear was now absolute. The trap had snapped shut. "I saw the synchronization," I said, listing the facts like charges in a courtroom. "I saw the video. I heard the speech, Emily. The golden parachute. The 5-year plan. The boring husband who is just a resource to be harvested. I heard it all." The only sound from the speaker was the wind howling into the microphone. No one spoke. They stood there in the rain, 4 women in expensive clothes, stripped naked by the truth. The unity of their group shattered. Sarah and Christina took a step back from Emily, physically distancing themselves from the fallout. That's a misunderstanding," Emily whispered. It was a weak, pathetic attempt. "David, please, let me in. Let me explain. It was just a joke. We were drunk. It didn't mean anything." "It meant everything," I replied. "It meant that our marriage is a fraud. And I don't negotiate with fraud. I liquidate it." "You can't do this," she shrieked, slamming her hand against the camera housing. "This is my house. I am your wife. You can't just lock me out." "I can," I said. "And I have. Your access is revoked. Your cards are cancelled. Your car is disabled. And your belongings are in the garage." "My what?" "Your things," I said. "I packed them. All of them. The clothes, the shoes, the jewelry. Everything you brought into this merger. It's all in the garage. I'm going to open the service door. You can take your boxes and leave." "I'm not going anywhere," she screamed, her voice cracking. "I live here. I'll call the police." "Go ahead," I said, calling her bluff. "Call them. I've already sent the video and the transcripts of your mother's text messages to my lawyer. We are filing for an annulment based on fraud first thing tomorrow morning. If you call the police, I will show them the evidence of your conspiracy to defraud me. Do you really want to explain to a sheriff why you married a man for his money and planned to divorce him before the ink was dry? Do you want that on public record? Do you want your friends to give statements?" She stopped. Her mouth hung open. She looked at her friends for support, but they were backing away. They were retreating to the SUV. They knew the ship was sinking, and they had no intention of going down with the captain. They had been complicit in the fun, but they wouldn't be complicit in the legal fallout. Jennifer was already opening the back door of the Cadillac. "David." Emily's voice broke. She was crying now, real tears mixed with the rain, mascara running down her chin. "Please. I love you. I do. I was just stupid. I was scared. Please, just open the door. We can talk about this. Don't do this to me." I looked at the screen. I looked at the woman I had promised to cherish yesterday. I looked for a spark of the love I had felt this morning, a remnant of the warmth. There was nothing. Just a cold, grey void. The video had done its work. It had cauterized the wound before I even knew I was bleeding. "The garage door is opening," I said. I pressed the button on the wall. Through the window, I saw the heavy white door of the detached garage begin to roll up slowly, grinding against the tracks. Inside, illuminated by the harsh fluorescent service light, sat the stack of grey plastic bins. They looked like coffins for a dead relationship. "You have 10 minutes before I close it," I said. "I suggest you hurry." I cut the connection. The screen went dark. I didn't watch them load the boxes. I didn't want to see the indignity of it. I didn't want to see Jennifer and Sarah awkwardly lifting crates of designer shoes into the back of a luxury taxi while Emily sobbed in the rain, her cream coat ruined. That was a spectacle for the security cameras to record, evidence for the lawyers if she claimed I damaged her property. For me, the show was over. The theater was dark. I walked to the front door of the house. I checked the lock. I checked the deadbolt. I checked the chain. Then I turned my back on the entrance. I walked through the empty hallway, past the kitchen, into the living room. I sat down on the sofa, facing the fireplace where our portrait used to hang. Now, there was just a nail in the wall, a small metal scar in the plaster. I sat there for a long time. I listened to the faint sounds from outside, the slamming of a trunk, the revving of an engine, the crunch of tires on gravel fading into the distance. Then, silence returned. But it wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence of waiting. It was a clean silence. The silence of a clean slate. The silence of a format complete. I picked up the iPad. I didn't look at the video again. I went to the settings and initiated a full factory reset. Erase all content and settings. I confirmed. The screen went black, then the white Apple logo appeared with a progress bar. I watched the bar fill up. It was wiping everything. The photos, the messages, the apps, the memories. It was scrubbing the device clean, returning it to the state it was in when I bought it. Pure. Untouched. A tabula rasa. I took a deep breath. The air in the house felt thinner, easier to breathe. The storm outside was still raging, battering the house with wind and water, but the fortress held. The walls were thick. The foundation was deep. I was alone. And for the first time in 2 days, I was safe. I closed my eyes and let the darkness of the room wrap around me. Tomorrow, there would be lawyers. There would be paperwork. There would be the messy, bureaucratic autopsy of a marriage that lasted 48 hours. There would be noise. But for tonight, there was only the rain and the quiet hum of a server cooling down after a successful purge. "System stable," I whispered into the dark. I fell asleep right there on the sofa, dreamless and cold, while the iPad screen finally went dark, its job done. The sun did not rise on Monday morning so much as the grey darkness of the night simply retreated, revealing a skyline of steel and glass that looked as sharp as a serrated knife. I woke up on the sofa in the living room, my body stiff, my neck aching from the angle of the cushion. The house was silent. Not the heavy, pregnant silence of yesterday, but the sterile, hollow silence of a museum after the exhibits have been removed. I sat up and looked at the wall where the wedding portrait had hung. The nail was still there, a tiny, accusing metal eye staring back at me. I walked to the kitchen. The marble counters were clean. The coffee machine was cold. There were no remnants of the perfect life we had staged. The ghost of Emily was already fading, exorcised by the ruthless efficiency of my actions the day before. I checked my watch. 6 a.m. The markets would be opening in New York in 3.5 hours, but the pre-market trading had already begun. The world was moving on. Money was moving. And I had one final transaction to close. I showered in the guest bathroom. I couldn't bring myself to use the master suite yet. The scent of her perfume still lingered there like a radioactive half-life. I dressed in my charcoal grey suit, the one I wore for board meetings and hostile takeovers. I tied my tie with mechanical precision, the silk knot tied against my throat. I looked in the mirror. The face staring back was pale, the eyes rimmed with red, but the expression was granite. David Harper, the husband, was gone. David Harper, the senior risk analyst, was online. I drove to the city in silence. The rain had stopped, leaving the highway slick and black. I didn't listen to the radio. I ran the simulation of the upcoming meeting in my head, over and over. Variables, outcomes, contingencies. I knew exactly what they would say. I knew exactly what I would do. My destination wasn't my office at the financial firm. It was a glass monolith on Wacker Drive, the headquarters of Vance and Sterling, Marcus's firm. I parked in the underground garage, the air thick with the smell of damp concrete and exhaust. I took the private elevator to the 42nd floor. Marcus was waiting for me in a conference room that overlooked the Chicago River. The room was all mahogany and leather, designed to intimidate. "You look like hell, David," Marcus said, not looking up from a stack of files. "I feel efficient," I replied, sitting down at the head of the long table. "Is it ready?" Marcus slid a thick document toward me. The petition for declaration of invalidity of marriage. Fraud. Deceit. Misrepresentation of intent. It's brutal, David. If this goes to court, it becomes public record. Their reputation in the social circles, what's left of it, will be vaporized. "Good," I said. "That's the leverage." "We also have the forensic accounting report," Marcus added, tapping a second file. "The debts, the credit card authorizations, the wedding loans her mother took out against their house, assuming you would pay them off. It's a house of cards, David. And you just pulled the bottom one out." The intercom on the table buzzed. The receptionist's voice was hushed, nervous. "Mr. Vance? They are here. Mrs. Grace and Mrs. Harper. They are insisting on seeing David immediately." Marcus looked at me. "Mrs. Harper. She's still using the name." "Not for long," I said. "Send them in." I stood up and walked to the window. I wanted them to see my back when they entered. I wanted to be a silhouette against the city, unapproachable and distant. The heavy oak doors opened. I heard the click of heels on the parquet floor. "David!" It was Linda's voice. The mother. The architect. It was shrill, trembling with a mixture of exhaustion and performative outrage. I turned slowly. They looked like refugees from a destroyed glamour magazine. Emily was wearing a tracksuit and a trench coat, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, her face devoid of makeup. Her eyes were swollen. She looked young, small, and terrified. Linda, on the other hand, was dressed for war. She wore a Chanel suit that I knew was fake. I had learned to spot the difference in stitching during my due diligence phase, and she was clutching a handbag like a weapon. Her face was a mask of indignation. "This is harassment," Linda announced, marching toward the table but stopping when she saw Marcus. "We are going to sue you for emotional distress. You locked my daughter out of her own home in the middle of a storm. She had to sleep at my house on an air mattress because you held her belongings hostage. Please, sit down," Marcus said calmly, gesturing to the chairs on the opposite side of the table. "We have a lot to get through." "I'm not sitting until he apologizes," Linda spat, pointing a manicured finger at me. "David, what has gotten into you? A little fight and you go nuclear? You are her husband. You have responsibilities." I looked at Emily. She hadn't spoken. She was staring at the table, picking at a loose thread on her coat. She knew. Linda was still trying to play the game, but Emily knew the game board had been flipped. "Responsibilities," I repeated, testing the word. I walked to the table and placed my hands on the leather surface. "You're right, Linda. I do have responsibilities. My primary responsibility is risk management. And yesterday, I identified a critical vulnerability in my personal sector. Stop talking like a robot." Linda screamed. "She is your wife, not a stock option." "She is a liability," I said, "and I am liquidating her." "David, please," Emily whispered. She finally looked up. Her eyes were pleading. "Mom, stop. He knows." "Knows what?" Linda scoffed. "He knows nothing. He's paranoid." I nodded to Marcus. Marcus picked up a remote control and pointed it at the large screen on the wall. The screen flickered to life. It wasn't the video from the club. That was too emotional. It was a spreadsheet. A timeline. Projected on the wall in high definition were the screenshots of the text messages between Linda and Emily. David is a bore, but he's a rich bore. Make sure you get the secondary password for the investment account. 5 years. Honey, just stick it out for 5 years and we are set for life. Don't forget to delete the video. If he sees that, the whole plan falls apart. The room went silent. The hum of the air conditioning seemed to roar. Linda's face went from red to a ghostly, chalky white. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked at the screen, then at me, then at Emily. You hacked her phone, Linda whispered. That's illegal. It was on the family iPad, I said, my voice flat. Synced. Automatically. You should really read the terms of service when you set up a cloud account, Linda. Data is shared. Secrets are not. I sat down. Here is the situation. The video from the Sapphire Club, where Emily explicitly states her intent to defraud me, along with these messages, proves a conspiracy. In the state of Illinois, this is grounds for an annulment based on fraud. It means the marriage never existed legally. It is erased. We'll fight it, Linda hissed, recovering some of her venom. We'll say it was a joke. We'll say you doctored the texts. We'll drag this out for years. You'll pay millions in legal fees. I don't think you will, I said. Marcus, show them the second slide. The screen changed. It was a list of numbers. Red numbers. Venue rental, $45,000, outstanding. Catering, $22,000, outstanding. Florist, $12,000, outstanding.
Honeymoon suite, $24,000, non refundable deposit.
What is this? Emily asked, her voice trembling. These are the expenses for the wedding, I explained. As you know, Linda insisted on the platinum package for everything. She told the vendors to bill the Harper account. However, the contracts were signed by you, Emily, and the credit card on file for the final payments was the supplemental Amex I gave you. So, Linda said, you pay it. It's your card. It was my card, I corrected. But yesterday, I flagged those transactions as unauthorized. I informed the bank and the vendors that since the marriage is being contested as fraudulent, I am not liable for the party you threw to celebrate the fraud. Marcus leaned forward. We have already received confirmation from the credit card company. They have reversed the charges pending an investigation. This means the vendors are now looking for payment. Since David's name is not on the service contracts, only yours is, Emily, the debt falls to you. Approximately $103,000. Due immediately. Emily gasped. I don't have that kind of money. You know I don't. I know, I said. And Linda doesn't either. I ran a credit check on you, Linda. Second mortgage on the house? Maxed out visas? You were banking on my liquidity to pay off your bad decisions. You were essentially selling your daughter to clear your ledger. Linda slumped in her chair. The fight had left her. She looked old, tired, and defeated. The arithmetic was undeniable. They were broke, and the bailout had just walked away. So here is the offer, I said, sliding the annulment papers across the table toward Emily. Option A, we go to court. I release the video and the texts to the public record. I file a civil suit for damages and attempted fraud. I hand the evidence to the district attorney. You might avoid jail, but you will be bankrupt and socially destroyed. And you will still owe the vendors. I paused. Option B, you sign this paper. Right now. You agree to the annulment. You agree that the marriage was invalid. You walk away with nothing from me. No alimony. No settlement. No car. Nothing. And the debt? Emily asked, a tear rolling down her cheek. The $100,000? If you sign, I said, I will write a check to the vendors today. I will cover the cost of the wedding. Consider it a termination fee. I'm paying to make you go away. But that is it. Not a penny more. You leave this office, you go back to your mother's house, and you never contact me again. Emily looked at the paper. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold the pen Marcus offered her. David. She choked out. Did you ever love me? Even for a minute? I looked at her. I analyzed the question. I searched my internal database for an emotional response. I loved the person you pretended to be, I said honestly. But that person doesn't exist. You are just an actor who forgot her lines. She flinched as if I had slapped her. She took the pen. She didn't look at her mother. She didn't look at Marcus. She signed the document. The scratching of the pen against the paper was the loudest sound in the world. She pushed the papers back to me. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't be sorry," I said, taking the papers and checking the signature. "Be better." I stood up. "Marcus will handle the filing. The check for the vendors will be issued by noon. Goodbye, Emily. Goodbye, Linda." I walked out of the conference room. I didn't look back. I heard Linda starting to sob, a low, keening sound of despair, but the heavy oak doors clicked shut, cutting off the noise instantly. I took the elevator down to the lobby. The air outside was crisp and cold. The city was fully awake now. People were rushing to work, coffees in hand, phones pressed to their ears. The rhythm of Chicago. I walked to my car, but I didn't get in immediately. I stood on the sidewalk and took a deep breath. I checked my internal systems. Heart rate, normal. Stress levels, nominal. Status, single. I felt a strange lightness. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't joy. It was the absence of weight. The illusion was heavy. The truth, no matter how cold, was light. I got into my car and drove to my office. When I arrived, my assistant, Sarah, looked up from her desk, surprised. "David, I thought you were on your honeymoon? Maldives." I walked past her, opening the door to my office. "Change of plans, Sarah," I said. "Cancel the flight. Cancel the hotel. And get me the Q3 risk assessment files for the Asian markets. I have some work to catch up on." "Okay," she stammered. "Is everything all right?" I stopped at the doorway. I looked at my desk. The dual monitors. The stack of reports. The clean, predictable lines of my life. "Yes, Sarah," I said. "Everything is perfectly balanced." I sat down in my chair. I logged into my terminal. The numbers flowed across the screen, green and red, logical and pure. I was back in control. The anomaly had been purged. The system was secure. I started typing. The end.